Everyone's had that one movie they just couldn't stop watching over and over as a little kid. For me, that movie was Cars. I was obsessed with this movie in my early years, binging it over and over again. And even when I wasn't watching it, I spent every waking moment listening to the soundtrack on my Lightning McQueen CD player, building up my collection of die-cast toys, most of which I still own, and even reenacting the full movie with my toys whenever I got the chance. Of course, as I got older, I grew out of this phase and got more attached to other things, but I still look back upon this movie with fondness. In fact, I rewatched it recently, and it still holds up really well. Even though it's one of the lesser-liked Golden Age Pixar movies, the fact that it came out sandwiched between 4 masterpieces didn't help. It's still a key part of their library that plenty of people, especially people my age, love. And since it's now 20 years old, I mean, come on, I had to do something. Given how the Cars 2 video I did 5 years ago was what really put me on the map as a video essayist, it just kinda made sense to revisit this franchise. And this time, the subject matter is actually good. So without further ado, let's drive back to Radiator Springs and Detroit and LA to talk about why this movie is way better than its reputation makes it out to be. As my generation knows, this movie's opening scene is simply iconic. It throws you straight into the action without delay, and brilliantly establishes almost everything going on, between the characters, what they want, and what's at stake. Strip Weathers, stage named the King, voiced by NASCAR legend Richard Petty, also stage named the King, is about to retire and hopes to get just one more win. Chick Hicks has fallen short of winning the Piston Cup for years, and he'll stop at nothing to secure his victory, even willing to turn races into the average Mario Kart World lobby. And of course, our main character, Lightning McQueen, has only one thing on his mind: becoming the first rookie in history to win the Piston Cup and all the glory that comes with it. It doesn't matter whose wheels he has to trample or what employees he has to push to do so. He doesn't value or even cooperate with his team, calling himself a one-man show. He pulls the dumbest stunts for a better shot at winning, or even just pleasing the fans. He already had a good shot at winning the opening race, but his stubborn ass just had to skip the pits a couple times, all for extra glory, which ended up costing him the race. He could have easily won, but this arrogant stunt resulted in the Piston Cup's first ever 3-way tie. Somehow. Seriously, how did touching the line with his tongue count? And why do cars even have tongues? Because winning still remains McQueen's only thought, he ignores the King's advice in favor of daydreaming about Dynaco, openly belittles his pit crew and sponsors, and takes a one-off jab from Chick a little too personally. This leads him to force his escort, Mac, to work overtime, taking him all the way from Motor City to Los Angeles, a 33+ hour trip with no breaks. Now, don't get me wrong, the Life is a Highway sequence is iconic for all the right reasons. From the song, to the visuals, to the vibes. It truly feels like you're going with Mac and McQueen on a road trip across the US. But at the same time, this is still a long trip without any rest. As expected, Mac starts to get tired and slow down, much to McQueen's dismay. He had the perfect opportunity to let him take a break, yet he still forced Mac to stay up late. He has too much pride to see how much he's pushing Mac, but you know what they say, pride comes before the fall. Mac's drowsiness causes him to lose McQueen, who gets even more lost when he takes a wrong turn and ends up tearing up Radiator Springs and sentenced to repaving its road. Yeah, a lot of things needed to line up perfectly for this to happen, and I wouldn't blame you for finding it a little contrived, but if McQueen had just let Mac recharge for even a couple hours, if he wasn't so keen on making it to LA first like he and Chick were actually in a race, none of this would have happened. He just didn't consider how Mac felt because he never thinks about anyone other than himself. And look where that's gotten him. After a flashy start in the city, we arrive in the small, dusty settlement of Radiator Springs, where we spend most of the movie. Quite the change of scenery, no? Never in a million years would we expect a big celebrity, especially one with a big ego like Lightning McQueen, to wind up in a rundown town like this. Yet here he is, forced to stay in the last place he wants to be right now until he fixes the road. At first glance, Radiator Springs seems like a barren wasteland. It's in the middle of the desert, not even on the map, and has been in steep decline for years. But once you get used to this different environment, you might find that it's actually quite nice. Compared to the crowdedness of the big city and McQueen's general life as a famous race car, the open nature of Radiator Springs and the surrounding Ornament Valley invokes such a western, summery vibe, especially as it gets more restored as the movie goes on. It just feels like it would be a great place to stop and hang out in for a bit, putting its forgotten status into question. During McQueen's time in Radiator Springs, not not a lot happens. He fixes the road, makes friends with the locals, and carries on. That may sound like a problem given how much of this movie's long runtime takes place here, but the movie thankfully does plenty of things to hold the viewer's attention. The pacing may be slow, but it's a relaxing pace that doesn't go too far and end up boring the audience, making for a pleasant ride. Considering nearly every modern kids movie is paced like a TikTok because today's youth have the attention spans of goldfish, it's such a breath of fresh air. The residents of Radiator Springs are, in all honesty, pretty one-note and standard. Luigi and Guido are Italian, Lizzie is old, Fillmore is high, Sarge is a World War II veteran. Wait, World War II? Was there? I'm sorry, I can only drag out this bit for so long. Let's just face the fact that this world makes zero sense and carry on. Despite their simplicity, their relationships and banter are still fun to watch and add plenty of life to this would-be deserted town, and the star-studded voice cast helps a ton. Cheech Marin, Jennifer Lewis, Tony Shalhoub, George f***ing Carlin. This movie seriously doesn't miss when it comes to his voice cast, and that extends to the main characters as well. Owen Wilson is such a good voice for McQueen. I can't picture anyone else aside from Keith Ferguson in this role. He's that good. Same goes for Larry the Cable Guy as Mater, Bonnie Hunt as Sally, Michael Keaton as Chick Hicks. It's honestly impressive how stacked the cast of this movie is. Of course, I can't talk about this film's cast without bringing up its heart and soul, Doc Hudson. Doc, for many, is the highlight of Cars 1. Even the people who don't like this movie like Doc, and for good reason. You're introduced to him on the wrong foot, or wheel in this case. He's Radiator Springs' doctor and judge, who immediately takes issue with McQueen's presence as a race car, even beyond him tearing up the road. He's a lot gruffer and more distant compared to the town's other residents, and he appears to have a strange relationship with racing in particular. He initially addresses McQueen as race car in a derogatory manner, and later challenges him to a race to humble him, knowing his arrogance would get the best of him yet again. It makes you question his past and what happened for him to be this way, until the truth is finally unveiled that 50 years ago, Doc was a Piston Cup racer. And not just any racer, he was the fabulous Hudson Hornet, one of the best to ever do it. However, he left that life behind and refuses to open up about it, even to his trusted neighbors, for reasons I think should be held off for later. You can really feel his age and anguish through his voice, which is full of sincerity, anger, relief, whatever mood the scene calls for, thanks to a stellar performance from the late Paul Newman. Yeah, that Paul Newman. The old Hollywood legend who was also a race car driver in his time. You rarely see casting as good as this. Back to some more general stuff, Pixar movies are also usually full of great humor, and Cars 1 is no slouch in that department. It's far from the gold standard of comedy, since a few jokes drag out a little longer than they should, and while I do enjoy my fair share of crude adult humor, some of this movie's attempts at that can come off as a little forced, and maybe even uncomfortable given what the director likes to do in his spare time. But this movie still provides more laughs than not. Remember when the Crabman described Shrek 1's humor as more laid back, reliant on the character dynamics and the actors' line deliveries? Cars 1 is pretty similar in that department. Like I said, the character interactions are just really fun and endearing to watch, as if you really are laughing with them. The dialogue all feels so natural. Even with the car puns here and there, it all feels like real conversations between real people. Randy Newman of Toy Story fame was put on board with the score, delivering his A-game. It's honestly some of my favorite of Randy's work, pulling me into the world and story even more. Radiator Springs is often accompanied with some chill country tunes that instantly helps one relax and immerse themselves in this western town. It contrasts greatly with the more somber pieces played in emotional scenes and the intense orchestra used in the races that really gets the blood, or in this case, oil pumping. As expected from Pixar, the animation is simply stunning. Realistic animation has lost its luster as of late now that it's become the norm, but keep in mind that this was 2006. Compared to every other animated movie at the time, and most of Pixar's output before then, this movie visually holds up like a fine wine. While there may be the occasional poorly lit shot or low-res establishing shot that tips you off when this movie was made, otherwise, it feels to me like this was the movie where theatrical 3D animation truly took its training wheels off. The colors, the lighting, the reflections, even the contrast between the glamorous Motor Speedway and the dusty Radiator Springs, plus the mix mix of the two aesthetics in LA to represent McQueen's growth all looks gorgeous even 20 years on. While it may initially seem like McQueen's time fixing the road is little more than busy work, it's actually key for his growth as a character. Of course, he spends his first day on the job getting his bumper beat, not just through the sentence, but also losing the race with Doc and being forced to stay up late repaving the road, as if he's actively being punished for his arrogance. The following day, however, things start to turn around thanks to the reality warping tow truck, Tow Mater. Between all the shorts and him hijacking the second movie, it's easy to forget that Mater played a key role in the story of Cars 1 beyond just funny, marketable comic relief. He and McQueen are polar opposites. While McQueen's a shiny, self-centered celebrity race car, Mater is an old, rusty tow truck who's very cheerful and willing to see the good in anything and anyone. He's kinda like the donkey to McQueen's Shrek, being the funny, upbeat friend who makes the self-centered protagonist open up. Mater's energy bounces off McQueen super well, acting as a great wake-up call for him and convincing him to come out of his comfort zone. This is proven when they return to Radiator Springs upon escaping Frank, who, by the way, scared the shit out of little me. Seriously, I ran out of the room every time just to avoid seeing what's basically the Cars version of a bull. Anyway, McQueen and Mater have a heart-to-heart where the former opens up about how important winning the Piston Cup is to him, during which he makes an offhand comment about leaving behind rusty old cars. This puts Mater off, and McQueen finally realizes, oh shit, I might actually be a bit of an asshole. He finally made a friend, not another fan or co-worker, an honest-to-God friend, and he doesn't want to ruin that because he's old and ugly. And it's here he realizes that a lot of people genuinely look up to him, and he doesn't want to ruin their images of him either. The part where Mater tells McQueen he made a good choice in his best friend is just so genuinely sweet. It's hard not to give an honest smile when McQueen does. Mater isn't the only key driving force in McQueen's arc, which brings us to Sally. McQueen and Sally frequently butt heads for a while before they begin to warm up to each other. Eventually, Sally offers to take McQueen on a nice drive through Tailfin Pass to help him clear his head? Does this count as a head? Anyway, yes, a drive. Not a race, just a leisurely drive. When you're famous and you constantly have to live up to high standards and come in first place all the time, you forget what it's like to just take it easy and live in the moment. You hyperfixate on one specific thing, leaving no room for breaks or connections, something that basically happened to Radiator Springs itself when the interstate was built and bypassed it. People have just reduced their and each other's lives to one goal or mistake as if nothing else matters, which brings us back to Doc Hudson. Doc did not quit racing of his own accord. He suffered a career-ending crash that forced him out of the Piston Cup. Even though he got put back together and still had a lot left in him, he was still rejected from another chance and cast aside. This continued to haunt him for 50 years, during which he hid from the world in Radiator Springs. It's proof of how demanding and careless the racing industry is, as well as how effective McQueen's attempts to change for the better are. The following morning, even after finishing the road, McQueen decides to stick around for a bit, stopping by each shop in the town and becoming their first customer in years. Wild how he went from an outsider who wanted to leave immediately to the one who brought the town back together again and pretty much found a new place to call home. Unfortunately, the celebratory drive between the repaired Neon is short-lived, as thanks to a call from Doc, McQueen is found by the RSN and forced back to his main route. He tries to have one more moment with Sally, and it was so easy for them to paint this as another forced third act misunderstanding or fight, but that's not what they did. It's a bittersweet goodbye that neither of the two wants. McQueen doesn't know what to say to Sally, yet she understands him anyway and thanks him for everything.
It's just a road. No. It was much more than that.
I can't really describe it better than how Sally did. It seemed like all McQueen had to do was repave a road, yet by doing so, he made friends, brought a community back together, and learned to appreciate life beyond a winner's podium. What began for him as a mistake ended up being the wake-up call he needed. Alas, all good things must come to an end, as McQueen must finally head to LA to face his destiny. This time though, things are different. McQueen's a lot less confident and frequently loses focus on the task at hand. It makes you think his time in Radiator Springs might have been a waste, until you remember what could have happened had he never ended up there through the character of Chick Hicks. Chick is a lot like how McQueen was at the start of the movie. Selfish, arrogant, has an ego bigger than Disney's Monopoly, and willing to sacrifice anything and anyone for glory. Unlike McQueen though, Chick has been going at this for years, and he never had a character arc to redeem himself, degrading him to the ultimate spoiled asshole. He's basically a mirror to McQueen, showing what could have happened had he never opened up and learned to appreciate those around him. He would have ended up as another depraved, obsessed sellout. Thankfully though, he didn't, because he found people to back him up. No matter how many times I've seen it, this final race puts me on the edge of my seat every time. Between McQueen showing off the tricks he learned, Guido's world record-breaking pit stop, Chick being a dick, Randy Newman going harder than ever on the score, and the crowd going wild and welcoming the Hudson Hornet back into the spotlight with open doors, it's such a great climax that ties everything together. However, nothing about this race matters more than how it ends. Just as it seems like McQueen is about to fulfill his lifelong dream of winning the Piston Cup, Chick slams into the king, sending him to a violent crash. Noticing this, McQueen slams on his brakes, letting Chick take the cup. He had been dreaming about winning the Piston Cup his whole life. He worked tirelessly to make it there. And when he finally had the perfect chance, he gave it up because he couldn't let another legend's career end in flames, because it was the right thing to do. Sure, logically, he maybe could have helped the king after winning, but that's besides the point. The point is that there's a lot more to not just racing, but life than just winning. You won't be remembered for how rich you were or how many trophies you took home, but rather for how you were as a person and role model. When Chick crosses the finish line, he's the only one celebrating. The entire rest of the speedway is silent. And during his ceremony, he's given his cup in a "here it is, now shut up" energy before getting booed off the stage by everyone. Sure, he may have won the cup, but he didn't earn it. On the other hand, when McQueen pushes the king across the finish line, everyone goes wild. Because, in an ironic sense, giving up your victory to help another is some of the most winner-type stuff imaginable. The respect you gain from your compassion is a far more valuable reward than any shiny trophy could ever possibly be. Man, what an awesome movie. I'm so glad I got the privilege to grow up with it. While not the best Pixar movie of my childhood, considering I also grew up with Finding Nemo and Toy Story 2, the latter of which is still my favorite film from Pixar, this is definitely the one I connected with the most. I'm very happy to see more people give it the respect it deserves in recent years, considering the subpar reputation this franchise has had for a long time. I blame the second movie. While not the studio's best by any means, it's still a classic, full of the charm that made Golden Age Pixar movies so special. Not that modern Pixar movies are all bad. I mean, I loved Hoppers, and Toy Story 5 will probably be fun, even though we still should have retired Woody and the gang a long time ago, but that's a topic for another day. But there's an unmistakable charm in movies like this I don't think anyone could recapture. No matter how old I get, I will always love Cars, as it proceeds to age near flawlessly. Well, I guess that's it. The big movie of my childhood probably could have used a more in-depth analysis, especially considering the Cars 2 video I wrote on a whim simply trying to be like the Crabman was longer. But I kinda just finished work on an FE4 analysis the length of a feature film, which took up most of my time for several months. And I still have some other videos I'd like to do after this, ones that I hopefully won't set a deadline for the sake of an anniversary. I gotta stop doing this. Besides, while I like discussing film and animation every now and then, video games are still my bread and butter, the content I want to prioritize. Anyway, see y'all in a year when I must talk about Cars 3. If you really want to see me talk about Cars 2 again, I will rank all the tracks in the video game, I guess. Kachow!